He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
They say life is stranger than fiction.
It's a computer, it's a scanner, a material analyzer. It can do medical diagnostics, measure anything in animals and plants, and even scan your surroundings and give you some history.
But sometimes what we see in movies or read in books is so incredible that it obviously couldn't be possible. Or could it?
Although this is a fictional device, it's going to be real. I'm excited about the tricorder, and I think that
it's going to be real.
I believe it's going to be real. One day it's going to be real.
I'm Brian Crump, and welcome to Sci-Fi Sci-Fact. This is a podcast where we take science fiction's strangest ideas, weirdest elements, and most unfeasible plot drivers and explore if they actually could happen. Maybe they already have. And in every episode, we bring in a scientist from New Zealand's McDiarmid Institute to explain the theories behind some of fiction's more fantastic flights of fancy. If any theory exists.
Who are you? Why aren't you masked? Who are these people? What the hell is that? What are you doing?
Tearing of the middle meningeal artery.
What's your degree in? Dentistry?
How do you explain slow impulse, low respiratory rate, and coma?
Fundoscopic examination.
Fundoscopic examination is unrevealing in these cases.
A simple evacuation of the expanding epidural hematoma will relieve the pressure.
My God, man. Drilling holes in his head's not the answer. The artery must be repaired. Now put away your butcher knives and let me save this patient before it's too late. Fundoscopic examinations.
That's right, described by some as the Swiss Army knife of science fiction censors, the tricorder. From Star Trek, of course. What this thing can't analyse isn't worth analysing. Signs of life, radioactivity, animal, vegetable, mineral, all of that. And here to tell us what it resembles in the material, aka real world, or how it might exist in theory if it doesn't exist already, is the McDiarmid Institute Associate Director and Senior Research Fellow at Auckland University School of Chemical Sciences, Dr. Michel Nieuwoudt. Kia ora, Michel. Welcome back to Nights.
Thank you, Brian. It's always lovely to be here.
Now, it sounds, to some extent now, given that it was invented in science fiction by Star Trek, back in the mid-60s,
Yep.
It sounds now like your common variety smartphone to some extent that we have in the 21st century in 2020. Or am I stretching it too far?
Well, I think it's even a further stretch than that. In the Star Trek in the 1966 to 69, there was actually another phone that looked like a little device that looked like a cell phone or a mobile phone, and that was their communication device, which was a little flip-top thing.
That's right.
Yeah, and that just enabled them to communicate back to base, or if they wanted to be beamed up, whereas the tricorder does all sorts of other things, not just communication. So it's a computer, it's a scanner, a material analyzer. It can do medical diagnostics, as you said, measure anything in animals and plants, and even scan your surroundings and give you some history. So I don't know if you've seen any of the Star Trek movies, but there's one pretty cool one where Spock arrives at a village and he takes his tricorder outside and scans the surroundings, and the tricorder tells him it has no record of this culture, which means that it must be thousands and thousands of years old, so it can pick up the surroundings, analyze it, and then tell you what kind of culture it is. So it's basically an all-in-one magic device.
It is a plot device that's used mostly by Spock and Bones, isn't it? Not so much by the Captain
Yes.
James T. Kirk.
Exactly. I've never seen him have one. He always seems to ask, is it McCoy? Dr. McCoy?
Bones,
and
yeah.
Bones, yep. And Spock for information from it. So...
maybe he never got computer science when he was at academy.
Maybe.
Maybe that wasn't his strength.
Maybe they separated the scientists and the captains or something.
Do we get any idea in Star Trek as to how this miraculous machine works?
There was one, they don't actually say how it works, but there was one instance where somebody asked Spock how this works. And he very hesitatingly said, it's basically we get the information from a machine. That's basically all he said. And then McCoy says, "Are you telling me a machine can give us information back and can tell us what to do?" Very puzzlingly. They don't really give any idea of how it works. But I think that they said it's a scanner and it uses electromagnetic radiation, basically, which is what it would do. So I think for some of the tricorders, you would contact them on the body, or you touch the body or the ground, whereas some of them you just held the tricorder away from the person or the minerals that you were looking at and scanned it. So.
The tricorder, so let's not mistake it with the communication device, which off the top of my head right now I've forgotten what that was called, but it looks like the flip-top mobile phone.
Yes.
Or maybe
he called it a communicator.
The communicator, yeah,
yes.
Well, of course, the communicator. Yeah. That looks like it's not that. So what does the tricorder look like? My memories are it looks quite it's silverish.
That's
and
right.
it's a small, but it could look a little bit like a fancy little transistor radio with a lot of chrome.
Exactly. So it's about 20 centimeters long, 25 centimeters long, and about 15 centimeters wide, and about 3 or 4 centimeters thick. So it's a little brick. And it has a little strap that they hang around their neck and carry it around. And this is supposed to have everything in it. So it can have sort of perhaps electromagnets in it, batteries. There was someone who decided to post up a detailed schematic design of the tricorder.
Somebody? What,
Yes, so
a Trekkie?
It must have been a Trekkie because he made this sound very convincingly and very real. So he had your architectural plans of this device. He even gave the weight. He said it weighed 430 grams. And he shows how different models are upgraded from the years 2360 to 2379. And in it, he says it has a cerium chrylide battery that lasts for 18 hours. And it's got 14 nickel carborundum crystal wafers with 217 extended DNA profiles and 3 isolinear chips. And, of course, none of these make sense to me.
Right. Are any of those words that you used before real materials? Does cerium exist?
Cerium? No, there's no such element.
Okay.
Or chrylide. You do get carborundum, and you do get nickel.
What's carborundum then?
Actually, I don't know. I'll have to look that up.
I assume it's got some carbon in it. It sounds
yes, it must be some
carbonistic.
carbon-based material.
Crystal wafers.
Yes, so crystalline wafers, which must have some... Yeah, so I think it's designed to sound very flash. And
Yes,
high-tech.
it sounds extremely flash.
Yes.
Extremely. How did the Trekkie get the plans to this, or did the Trekkie just make them up?
I think he looked at the one that the sci-fi creators designed in the movie, the props, and then he, in his own, designed his own version. But I must say, although this is a fictional device, it's going to be real. I'm excited by the tricorder, and I think that
It's going to be real.
I believe it's going to be real. One day it's going to be real. There's been quite a few people excited enough about it to start developing devices this size that can analyze various medical diagnostics, there was one in 1996, a company called Vital Technologies Corporation, and they sold a portable device, and they called it the official Star Trek Tricorder Mark I. And it had a thermometer and a barometer, a colorimeter that could measure different colors, a light meter, and a clock and a timer. It could also measure electromagnetic fields. So this is a sort of a first version, if you like.
I mean, Michelle, the ability for a small device to store huge amounts of information or to access huge amounts of information, that's not so unusual. I mean, a typical smartphone has got the power of any computer, any comparable. The largest computer around in 1966 when Star Trek kicked off probably wouldn't be as powerful now as your average, smartphone?
Exactly.
Its computational abilities.
Exactly.
So we've got that, but what we maybe don't have is the ability for some machine to just be, to wave it around somebody's head and to say, that person is not conscious, or there's some brain waves there, or that's radioactive. It's the sensing devices that are maybe trickier in this case.
Yes. Although you do get sensing devices now that use electromagnetic radiation or light, basically, to analyze different things. For example, you can get, if you ever go and have your pulse measured, sometimes they put a little clampy thing on your finger.
Yes.
And that measures, it's called a pulse oximeter. And what that does is, besides measuring the pulse or flow rate of your blood, or the pulsing of your blood, it also has a little diode in it, 2 diodes, that measure the oxygenation of your blood. So how much oxygen is in your blood. So whether you've got good oxygen, whether you're breathing and getting lots of oxygen in, or not much. So,
do you know, Michelle, how that works? Because it doesn't. Does it take your blood from your fingernail? And if it does, how does it do that?
No, it's actually non-invasive. And what it does is it uses a wavelength of light that can penetrate through your skin. It doesn't harm you. It's in the near-infrared region, so the wavelength of it is around 700, between, say, 640 and 850 nanometers. So it's in just beyond where you can see. So it's like really deep red color. And what it does is you shine 2 specific lines of light. So one will be at around 730 nanometers and one at about 810 nanometers. And at 730 nanometers, your oxygenated blood, your hemoglobin molecule, will have a different absorption of this light to your deoxygenated one. And then whereas at 810, they've both got the same kind of absorption. So you can use this information. So you send a little light through your skin, and it measures what's coming back, and it can tell what wavelength has been absorbed. And from that, it can get information about how much hemoglobin with oxygen is in your blood. So it's just non-invasive, and it uses near-infrared light, which is it's a form of light.
What other electromagnetic radiation could we use to scan our bodies or scan any other living or non-living material which could be emitted from a small device that we hold in our hand and which isn't going to then poison us with too much radiation or the person we're trying to assess?
Right. Definitely visible light, so moving into the visible light. If we use ultraviolet light, we can also measure stuff, but that tends to be bad for our skin. That would give us skin cancer. But visible light we could use to measure. Our group is actually developing I'll put it in inverted commas, tricorder.
Your group?
Yep. It's a portable device, so we're part of the Photon Factory. And we're developing a sort of a handheld device, much like the tricorder, with a little probe that uses visible light, in the near-infrared visible light, and you can put it on your skin, and you can look to see whether it basically shines light on your skin on a molecule. If you have a mole or might be a melanoma, you're not sure, it will actually measure the molecules in this and send the information back to this device, and it has a little detector, and it will tell you whether the molecules are typical for cancerous lesions or whether it's just a benign mole. And so this is about the size of a tricorder, and so there we go, where it's possible to do this. So this uses visible to near-infrared light.
So that's one application there.
Yes.
At a machine that can do all sorts of things. That's where the tricorder is so handy, isn't it?
Yeah. So
to speak.
They have developed sort of small portable mass spectrometry systems. And this can analyze materials, you can also bombard something with, you can develop a portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, which will bombard whatever mineral you're looking at with X-rays.
Portable X-ray. But
yep.
aren't X-rays dangerous to us? Don't we have to be very careful? I mean, normally when I get an X-ray taken, the person taking the X-ray disappears into the room next door.
True. I think perhaps the X-ray sources in these little handheld, it looks like a kind of a giant big hairdryer. And you can point this at the mineral in question or at an artifact, an art piece, which they do at the Melbourne Museum, actually. And what you can do is you can measure different elements. You can find out what elements are present in these materials. So if you had some clay or some rock and you wanted to find out what minerals are present in there, you could use an X-ray fluorescence. And it's got maybe it's a weak X-ray, I'm not sure, but it measures just a small, very small area of sample. Perhaps for the X-rays that we're exposed to, we have a large area that we're irradiating. But these are able to measure small areas of samples, say around 1 millimeter or less. So you can measure minerals with them or elements. So at the Melbourne Museum, they're very keen to measure how much arsenic is present in the samples that they store, because they used to store, sort of preserve stuff in arsenic, especially stuffed animals. So they use a portable X-ray gun, if you like, to use to measure the arsenic in there. So I guess that uses X-rays. So we've got X-rays and visible light they're already using in various small devices.
Getting back to where we began, though, with the tricorder, the other thing it can do is you can wave it around in some village in some distant part of the galaxy, and it will tell you that it has no record of the culture here. Now, that's not... I mean, how could a machine... It would have to have a camera, wouldn't it? And then it would have to have the ability to process whatever visual information is there, compare it with its memory banks, and then come up with an answer saying we have no record of a culture which has these kind of artifacts or buildings or whatever in our memory.
True.
Which sounds a little bit more like what a smartphone might do when it gets smarter.
Indeed. Actually, that's true. It could do a sort of 360-degree scan, which you can do with cameras. Good, great. And then, it can even send it to a big database via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, where it can scour a whole bunch of...
Did we have silicon chips? Were they already in use in the mid-60s when Star Trek kicked off?
Transistor diodes, when were they? I actually don't know.
I can't remember.
So depending on when transistor diodes,
yes,
transistors were CMOS chips.
We must have had transistors by then. I'm sure we did by then.
Yeah. So then
I'm not old enough to remember.
Okay, so silicon chips should have been around by then, probably. But
the other thing that is key in terms of our ability to access information now and analyze whatever we see in front of us is the cloud, is that it doesn't have to be all on that one machine. The information is stored in the internet, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. So it can get sent via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to some other storage place. True. So it doesn't have to have this huge memory.
It just has to have the ability to transport information to the cloud and get the information back again quickly.
Yes.
That's the key.
Yes.
Do you know, I don't know how much of a Trekkie you are, but do you know whether there's any sense in Star Trek of something like the internet existing? See, I get the sense when I remember Star Trek that it was all about a very smart, isolated machine, not machines talking to each other. We communicated with them, they communicated back to us, but they didn't communicate with each other. What's your memory?
From what I remember, they used to send the information back to Starship. And then they had these computers on the Starship with...
They had big old fat mainframes, didn't they?
Yeah. In the older ones, in the newer Star Treks, they got sort of more modern ones. But I think the more modern ones, more modern version Star Trek movies, they would send them to Starship and they would have internet. And I think...
You're not the only one working on a tricorder-like device, though, are you? In fact,
Oh,
isn't
no.
there a competition? And are you part of that competition?
No.
No?
This was a while ago. This was a company in the US. There was a philanthropist who offered $10 million. It was called the X Prize. And he offered this for someone to develop a real tricorder. And there was a company that worked for 5 years, and they called Basil Leaf Technologies, and they won $2.5 million from that. And they developed a device it's a suite of devices called Dexter. And it's basically a bunch of small gadgets in one kind of pack, portable devices. And this was specifically to help ER doctors. So you could have this little set of things at home, and you could measure your blood pressure, your ECG, your temperature, your blood oxygen saturation levels. And then this would send breath sounds, and this would send it back to the doctor at ER, and then they would decide whether you needed an ambulance or just rest, take Panadols.
Isn't that the next step, really, is an amalgamation of the smartphone technology and the diagnostic tricorder tool or the like of that, which then communicates with the cloud? Because the more you can throw information back to a database, the more it can throw back to you in terms of this is what this looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you'd have to have a device that you could attach to your smartphone. But these tricorder ones that are being developed will have their own smartphone function, I guess, that would be able to send that information through. But people are developing attachments to smartphones that you can take a picture of your skin, if you like, or take a picture of something, and then you can send it through, and it will take a spectrum of something, and it will send through to a database which will analyze things for you. So, yes.
There are two sensors that we use to analyze the world around us that I don't know if computers are yet so good at using, at least not ones that are in everyday use. I'm thinking about our sense of smell, which is really our ability to pick up different chemicals and molecules in the air, isn't it?
Yes.
And our sense of taste, which is something similar. And at the moment, a smart device can look at images, it can maybe analyze sound, but in terms of chemical concentrations in the air, say what's coming out of our breath or what might be happening with the skin, that's not something that we have at the moment, or it's so easy for our machines to do. Or am I wrong there, Michelle?
I think you're wrong. There's actually a group at Plant and Food Research that is, I think it's Andrew Kralicek, and he's developing a digital sensor, breath gas analyzer or particle analyzer, which can actually, basically an electronic nose that can smell and detect stuff from
Really?
your breath. Yeah. The idea is if you blow out onto this, it can pick up whether you've got maybe even COVID-19, that's my input. But it can pick up a variety of things from your breath and give you an idea of what you're breathing out or what's in the air, what chemicals might be in the air.
How new is that technology, though? How advanced is that technology?
They're still developing it, so it's still being developed. And then you also have Aeroqual, which is a company that's able to analyze ozone in the air and nitrous oxide. And I have a colleague, David Williams, who's helped develop that company. And so they are able to already measure ozone levels and nitrous oxide in the air.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sci-Fi Sci-Fact, hosted by me, Brian Crump, produced by Andrew Robertson, and of course, made possible thanks to the incredible knowledge of those brilliant scientists at the MacDiarmid Institute. You can find more episodes of Sci-Fi Sci-Fact on the RNZ podcast page. RNZ's podcasts are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and iHeartRadio, or pretty much wherever you find your podcasts. And make sure to follow us so you don't miss out on any new episodes.